And remember, each hotel wants about 250 to 300. So you have 3 hotels to look forward to, huge hotels. And how much commercial? Do you remember?
That's not specified.
It's not specified. We did do a study. Kennedy Smith was here. You've heard her speak. She was part of the consultant team. If I may summarize her proposal, she says, if you do mindless retail, unimaginative mindless retail, there's a capacity at the end of 15,000 square feet. You know, in other words, just everybody's in their own. If you do imaginative, well-designed retail that attracts people, there's much more capacity than that. So what she identified was what's called the void analysis. This is what's missing if you don't do much. You know, when the people come in, you'll need 15,000 more. That's nothing. That's like a third of a supermarket. So there isn't much retail possible, except we are providing this imaginative kind of retail that that Kennedy was referring to. So that's coming. Yep. Yes, sir.
How high of a building is going to be allowed by the Navy due to the flight paths?
You know?
It's
not an issue.
It's not an issue.
So a 30-story building is not an issue.
Not an issue.
They're very high by the time they get here.
How large is the hotel at Seaside?
The hotel at Seaside has not been built. It's a series of, some people say Seaside is a hotel, you know, because there's so much rental. The hotel at Seaside are the 2 big chunks of housing to the south that has not been built. And I haven't heard that calculation for a long time. I expect it's something like 200 rooms. But I'm talking about really old cobweb memory. Because it just got hit with, well, to tell you the truth, what actually happened at Seaside is that the people who rent their houses don't want the hotel. Because it cuts into the rental program. So that's really the hotel at Seaside. And there's a lot of adversity at Seaside, don't get me wrong. It's a real place. You probably get along better than the people at Seaside. I don't know.
Okay, let's talk transportation just for a few minutes for a change of pace. We obviously are working very closely with the urban design team, the urban designers. These are the folks that get the blank sheet of paper and they have an engineering scale and they measure exactly 60 feet for a commercial depth of a store because they know that works. Some of the teams that you see will just kind of do little asterisks and triangles and there's no scale to what they draw. But these folks know urban design. And so we have a rule of thumb in our planning, and it's LU1 TR2. Figure out the land use pattern and the land use design first, and TR for transportation comes second. Never do your transportation first and then tell the urban designers, now see what you can do with that. You've given them, you know, one arm behind their back or even worse. So land use pattern and vision for the place first, transportation second. So these are, this is just a general indication of town centers that can emerge along the area. And then we will have the thoroughfares as they go through these different contexts designed differently. The thing you want is diversity of a cross-section. A lot of the DOTs in the country used to be state road departments that worked out in the countryside. So they liked a cross-section that went for 6 miles without changing. And when they got to a town, they would change when they got to a town, but it was miles between towns. We want changes very frequently. Every quarter to half a mile, you change the street. Okay? Now, one of the first things we wanted to look at is very short term. What could we recommend for this island that is very short term and maybe very inexpensive for you to do? And you see that little sign up at the top? That's the first thing. 30 miles an hour in the bend where the tall condos are across from the shopping, and it's fearful. It's a fearful walk across that street to get to the other side. I mean, unless you're in the prime of your life and you're very confident. Okay? But if you're very young or very old at all, that's a difficult run. So 35 miles per hour for the posted speed limit from Johnson down to the place where it next down again. Now you have a, back up, this is a sidewalk, this blue line, that we're proposing a sidewalk on that one side of the road. And there's a way you can do a curve that separates the traffic from the sidewalk, where the curve goes along and has a little notch, comes back up. And so the sheet flow of water can go to those notches and go right through. But for most of the distance, you have a nice curb that will make the pedestrians feel more comfortable on the other side. And see, here's a pedestrian crossing of the driveway there, and another pedestrian crossing. Now let me show you the next detail on this. There's a 100-foot right-of-way, and so what we were doing is taking the center turn lane in 2 lanes, and we're putting this pedestrian sidewalk down this side. So that's the 2 pedestrians that you see, and there's still a bike path on that side. Pedestrians and bicycles can share this. So that's not ideal, but it's an interim measure to bring some pedestrian activity to this very central area. Now here's a close-up. Here's the Bellagio Shopping Center on the other side, 30 miles per hour again. And here's the crosswalk, the brand new crosswalk. It goes from the left side of the entrance driveway, and here is the blue sidewalk all the way on the other side. So you can come from a condo and actually walk down the sidewalk and have a crossing right there. Now, to make sure that crossing works, next, we're going to put in one of these, or at least we recommend that you put one in. Ignore the background of the city there, but this is the signal, and it's a red signal, and you see the pedestrian crossing. That looks like my associate Dwayne, but it's really not. Okay, next. Now, you also have a lot of beach access. I know all along this beautiful Emerald Coast, beach access is a very important thing to the middle class, okay? They're the people that go to the beach access from a modest home further up in the country, further up in the city. So we suggest that where you have these beach access points, that you actually park parallel.
Beaches to the top?
Yeah, beaches on the upper side. You allow parking along Perdido Key Drive there. And you post it from a 35, you drop down to a 25 for this immediate area. And you let the people park here, move down a sidewalk to a crosswalk, and go to the beach. So that's enlivens. There's always a shortage of parking at your beach walks, right? Now, one other minor point I want to mention: each of the beach access points is lacking a dune walkover, a boardwalk dune walkover to protect the dune. And I know you need some vehicle access at some of those points, but you could have a walkover and a drive over. You could do a minor one-lane wooden bridge that motor vehicles could go over to get the emergency access you need at the beaches. Next. Okay, we have within the 100 feet right away, we've got a typical section here where there would be shopping here, and you'd have a sidewalk with trees.
The gray is buildings in this case. This is a town center.
So you'd have trees in tree wells, and the tree species is to be determined yet. But you could do ample parking along the edge of that sidewalk and still have a good room for 2 12-foot travel lanes in the center. Now, some of you are saying, well, that angle parking looks backwards to me. Well, it's reverse angle parking. You travel this way and you put it in reverse and you pull right in until your back wheel hits the curb. That sounds crazy, right? Well, you do half of that when you're doing parallel parking anyway, see? When you do parallel parking, you're up and you have to do that. And then you have the fearful second turn of the wheel, to get it right so you don't embarrass yourself by bumping over the curb. This is the safest way to angle park in the world, because what happens? You park here, you go by 2 shops, you bring 2 bags of things out, you load it in the trunk from the sidewalk, right? And then you get back in the car, and the cyclist that's coming this way is able to make eye contact with the driver. Oh, there's a bicyclist, I see. It's not that you're here where your head's way back over there near the curb, you can't see anybody. You just say, oh, I hope nobody's behind me because I'm backing out. So this is the safest way.
Well, you also see the car coming the way you don't do. the other way. The other way is you go very slowly, hoping to be noticed.
How many people have tried this down on in the center of Pensacola, downtown? 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, okay.
One
So
other
it's
thing we
not
heard
good to
is that actually the doors open in a way that the kids go to the sidewalk instead of through the traffic. Although I don't know any kids actually that don't. But that's a nice thing to add.
The wee ones. Now, we proposed this in South Carolina. They have a lot of racing and football and stuff. And they thought, man, you can back them all in there and have a great tailgate party.
That's true.
They really loved it there. Next, please. Okay, now, this would occur. There's a great deal of debate that we noticed even before we got here between the 2 lanes and the 4-lane proposals. All right? So you have the 100 feet of right-of-way. And if the traffic gets to a point where you need to 4-lane this section, here's your 4-lane. Now would you flip back to the other one, please? And flip back again to that a couple of times. You get the picture? You just take away the angle parking, go to parallel parking, and it turns a 2-lane street into a 4-lane street.
So you can build it right away, but use it only when you need it. And by the way, it could also possibly be on special event days, or perhaps during commuting times. And the rest of the time you can have the additional capacity. It's only, and cities administer that easily. When other many cities clear the parking during the special times.
So that's we call this a convertible street design. Convertible street design. All right, you've heard about the beach mouse from among yourselves, and Andres spoke to it significantly. There is a lot of regulatory activity that's underway that has to do with the beach mouse. WCI is under a process with Fish and Wildlife and the Corps of Engineers, and they're going to get a Section 7 permit at the end of that.
That's been going on for years.
Okay, the habitat plan is underway. Again, Department of Interior has to do that after it goes through Atlanta and up to DC and a couple of places in DC.
But that's the one that's being brought locally. That's the 66 acres that's being brought to you. So if you need mitigation, you don't have to go to Washington.
So this says 66 acres to be administered locally. So that whole process is underway. There's another process, the EIS, the Environmental Impact Study for the 4-lane Perdido Key Drive. And that's with Florida DOT and Federal Highway, and again, Fish and Wildlife, and that'll be another Section 10 permit. That's a Section 7 permit, for those of you that really like the details. So all of this is going on.
Okay, now there's one thing we want to explain to all of you, because the more you understand, the better. Okay, and I think we're all adults here. The reason that environmentalism is so difficult, it takes so long, is that the environmental groups, like let's say what would be one that wouldn't have me shot? Let's say the let's say Greenpeace. Okay, what they do is they sue. They sue the Fish and Wildlife and EPA. So whenever there's a mitigation that's granted to somebody, even as they go through the process, they automatically sue to hold things up, to teach them a lesson. And of course, the poor Fish and Wildlife in Washington has its budget reduced by these lawsuits. It's very costly. So they hate it. That's why they hesitate. They try to get everything right. This is something we learned here, that this is happening. What we're afraid is that when the road comes in, the widening of the road, and there is a lawsuit, not if, when there's a lawsuit, they'll go ahead in the manner of good lawyers and just sue everybody down the line. Right? Even though this is close to happening after many years, and this could be pretty close to happening after many years, the thing to do is to do a kind of shotgun, and everybody gets sued and everything gets held up. In other words, you're punished. So one of the things we're recommending, frankly, is that get this master plan done, and just hesitate for a while before you go into this one, so that there isn't this kind of waterfall or avalanche of lawsuits that then affects everybody, including WCI. And this is just real professional advice from people who tell us this is the way that's happening in Washington. So we're being very careful about what and when we ask for, just to prevent this from happening and getting everybody involved and stuck for another quite a few years. So there's a whole underlying strategy here that's not technical. It just has to do, I've never done anything more complicated in my life. It goes all the way to Washington and so forth. But let me just put it this way. This is to give you confidence that when we say put it off or do something, that we kind of know what we're talking about. It's just to avoid problems. Minimize problems.
I'll tell you a very brief story.
By the way, Rick figured this out. He pieced it together and said, oh my God. So this is Rick's sleuthing.
Had to get it down on paper. Brief story. The Florida Department of Transportation, I had the good fortune of working for them for about 10 years. Very early, when I just got out of school. And their district office is in Chipley, Florida. And in Panama City, somebody wanted to do something with a street down near the hospital in Panama City. So, they wanted to change something, and that's a difficult thing to do. Well, they got resolutions from about 9 different organizations in town. The Chamber of Commerce, the Garden Club, the Kiwanis Club. All these resolutions were taken. Then they drove them to Chipley, and they put them on the engineer's desk, the chief engineer. And the chief engineer said, well, you've made my job a whole lot easier. And they got exactly what they wanted. The DOT has never been in more of a mood to do what you at the local level want to do.
If you get your act together.
But it's best if it's unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can get support behind a very good plan, then there may be some less encouragement to do any lawsuits. So unanimity, get to where you understand this and speak with each other about it in a unified way. Next. Traffic counts. In short, you have about 16,000 vehicles up there at the top, right about here. Then you have about 14,000, 12,000 per day. This is vehicles per day. And 12, and then it jumps up to 13. And that's the Alabamians coming across just to get to the Floribama, and then they're going back. So that's why that number is bigger than this number in the middle, right? So that's the current picture. And that's the very first thing we look at, because that helps us know exactly we get our finger on the pulse of this body of land. Go ahead.
Is that average or seasonal?
That's average. That's a single point that it was measured in May of this last year, May of 2012. So it's just getting into the peak season. Not quite June, July, August, but late May. This is what's being discussed in some reports that are being done for the DOT and for the county. That's a 4-lane, and when you say 4 lanes, that's 4 through lanes. You have extra. There's a left turn. There is a deceleration, acceleration, sidewalks, bike lane.
It can add up to 7 lanes. 4 can add up to 7, because there's a center lane in the middle, right, for drive turns, and then the decel lanes. So right at the point where you want to cross, you might be crossing 7 lanes.
These pedestrians are drawn to scale, because they're having to cross that large road. That makes it that makes it difficult to cross for anybody that's not right in the middle of their lifespan. Go. Okay, so what do you determine? How do we determine what size the road should be? Well, this is an example right at the Alabama line. You can see that right at the very top. And this is a page out of the county report that's been done so far. And they looked at a number of traffic counts from 97 up to 2005. And then they did some mathematical straight line growth option. And they did a straight line at the county line, or at the state line, they did a straight line. And it goes up to about 25,000 when you get up to 2030. Now, that's one way to do it. Now, let me look at a little closer at this. Next slide. That's about 4.7% per year straight up. Now, normally, those curves are not straight for that long of an amount of time. This is the 2012 count that I just reported to you. And see, it's a little below the straight line. So there's a lot of more uncertainty once you get out to this end of the whole scale. Next, please. Now, when we're designing, that's one way to design roads. Just count the traffic, factor it up, and design the road. Now, what we spend a lot of time looking at is pedestrian safety. and pedestrian, bicycles, and bus riders. So this is the pedestrian fatality potential. If you're unfortunate enough as a pedestrian to be hit by a moving car that's going 20, 5% chance you'll be a fatality. Going 30 jumps to almost 50% chance you will not survive. And at 40 miles per hour, you don't have a chance. Okay? The posted speed in that curve
Sorry,
is
that's at what speed? You don't have a chance?
40.
And you know what that feels like? Nothing.
And
40 is you do.
the
gravity.
posted speed in the curve is 45. Dwayne Carver and I have been measuring with our speed guns like we told you earlier in the week we would. And today we caught somebody going through there at 57 miles an hour, right in front of the Villaggio. And most of them were at 50 going through there. Next. So that has to change, folks, as far as safety is concerned. Now, we'll talk a lot more about these plans. This is an early preview of that, but I wanted to say these are the village centers that have been worked on by these good urban designers all week. And I said LU1, TR2. So we took the actual traffic counts I showed you, and then we added the trip impact of the extra 3,500 units in roughly this arrangement, and we came up with our own separate traffic volume projection. Next. And let me show you exactly what we calculated at a certain point in the whole system. Now this is Gongora Drive. This left turn vehicle is waiting to turn left onto Gongora, and it's right at the foot of the bridge. Now notice something here. That whole road is tilted to one side, you see. That's called super elevation. That's what the extreme of that is when you go to a NASCAR track, you know. And they're all on the side.
Oh, yeah.
They do that for comfort for you when you're driving along this at 45 miles an hour. So it's okay at this bridge perhaps, but you don't want to have that same super elevation, which you do, down at Johnson when you're coming back into the town center. It's like NASCAR going into the town center. Doesn't make sense. So that needs to be changed. Okay, at Gongora, we looked at 3 series of counts here for you at this intersection. The blue one is the traffic counts that were taken last May. And they're up here at about 16, 17,000 for the north leg on the top of the T, the south leg, and then the east for the side street. Then we looked at the 2030 build traffic that is in the county's report for 4 lanes. And it got up to almost 30,000 at that projection, just below 25 for the south leg, and then a small number for the east side. Ours, based on the traffic counts plus the 3,500 units being built, came out to be substantially less. Ours is the yellow bar. So the traffic estimates vary, and the way it will all play out will vary. So when there's a high degree of question about the variability of the future traffic, which determines how wide the road should be, the best thing we always recommend is to put a permanent recorder measuring device in the middle of the road that measures traffic 365 days per year on every 15-minute increment. This is a photo of a group putting in the loops in the pavement, just like the ones that control your traffic signals. And they put the loop in there. They have 2 of them so they can measure your speed also. You hit that one, and you hit this one in a certain number of seconds, and the computer calculates, oh, they're going 45 miles an hour. But that's what they do. They saw these in, and these installations are $20,000 to $25,000. But that's a pretty small price compared to the total bridge cost and the total construction cost of everything else. But all 365 days, they measure every 15 minutes. There is no doubt about what the traffic is. Peak season or off season. Somebody mentioned, is that during the peak season? Well, this is every day of the year. So we pretty strongly recommend that that the county work with DOT, get one of these things put at the foot of the bridge on the south side.
By the way, this is just to say, the 4-laner still gets built. It's just that what it tells you is at what time does the the traffic shift, does the parking shift and so forth. Because it takes so very long to get anything permitted and designed and budgeted, that 4-laner simply has to keep moving, because you'll need it eventually. Nobody has said here that we don't need it. The question is, when do we actually need to use all 4 lanes, one way or the other? And what we hope, frankly, is that it'll be flexible depending on what time of the year, what day of the year, and so forth. It's going to be a really complex, how did you call it? A multi-use 4-laner? You had a convertible 4-laner.
Right. So then we took the traffic that we developed and we ran a series of traffic engineering analysis models. We took the existing 2-lane on the existing network. Then we took the future traffic that came off of the Perdido Key plan that was emerging on the tables around us. And we ran the existing street system. We ran the future demand for 4 lanes. And then we ran a hybrid system of 2-lane and 4-lane combinations. So this is the results of that traffic simulation. And this shows actually the volumes that were put into the model and how they would run on the street system that we have worked out in conjunction with the urban designers. Now, this is a very easy thing to read once you reach the point of congestion where the traffic just starts backing up. Each of these moving, there goes a truck, you see. Well, that's the length of it. You have trucks and cars moving along in the model, and that's a pictorial representation of what it does.
Quick point.
Quick point.
I noticed you mentioned that the devices would only be on the south side of the bridge. Why not the north side? Because the congestion at the end of the day is tremendous leaving the beach.
We would love to have a permanent recorder at the north side and the south side, in the bend, by the park,
Well, I'm
and
just
at the
saying
state
that-
line. We just can't afford more than one. Okay? That's the problem. We only can afford one, so that's the optimal place to put it. Okay.
Okay. An interesting thing that happened in the Charrette is that there was a kind of skepticism of any kind of retail, and then once they realized that what we were talking about, there was a kind of competition for the town center. Can we have it? Can we have it? Can we have it? And we studied all of these areas, and the ones, for example, there's one here at the, I would call it at the harbor. You know, the harbor just off Gongora, is that the name of it? There's one at the intersection, which is up there by the Publix, which is actually in our contract. That's actually in our contract, so you know that's a given. There's the excellent intersection here. It's excellent because it's so messed up. Somebody has to fix it. But it's also a good 100% corner. It's where the people who live over here come together. And then there's 2 opportunistic ones. There's land owned by WCI, where it's the only outfit that owns land on both sides. So you can actually it's the only time we have a chance to get the people living in the north to have a coherent crossing to the south on the beach. So we said, that's great. And they said, go ahead and play with our land. Then there's the intersection down here on River Road, which is an obvious one, because here's where it splits. And it's actually quite a large ownership. There's quite a large chunk under single ownership here. There's 2 others that we didn't study because they didn't make that much sense. And then there's the Floribama, which definitely makes sense. There's land there, there's a lot of people, they're planning to build a hotel, there's already restaurants and so forth, so that's a happening one. The question is whether it's a kind of mess of single buildings with incoherent parking lots or a proper town center. And so we're going to show you these. These are the ones that we designed in the dark circles. Next. Okay, now this land here, this is south of Sims Road. Okay. Everything above it is basically designed, allocated, and on the way. That's essentially the golf course. South of Sims Road, there is the usual, dune, wetland, etc. But basically nothing has been built. Now from the road, you think the north of the road has been built because you keep seeing things. Well, there's this and that and the pizza joint. Well, there's really nothing. Very little has been built, and most of it, with the possible exception of the Villaggio, is what I would call first-generation construction, which is you can count on it being demolished probably in 20 years, you know, and just replaced with something of higher value. So this is a tremendous piece of land that's actually available and very, very close. By the way, this is the kind of land that the seaside pattern makes valuable, because it, as opposed to the current pattern in which the front is valuable and the back is nothing. Okay, so next. Now, we took the plans that were